Friends, we all know, and I've been announcing it all these days, during this Amrita Sher-Gil National Art Week, that Navina Sundaram is the niece of the iconic painter, artist, Amrita Sher-Gil. She is her sister Indira's daughter. We are honored, privileged that she is amongst us. We really welcome you. We have a battery of talented people from the country. Here is Sadanand Menon. He is going to engage with Anju Dodiya tomorrow. Then here is Atul Dodiya, the iconic artist. Then here is Anju Dodiya. She's going to present her thing tomorrow. Then of course we have Mithu Sen. You had seen her presentation yesterday. And Dayanita, who is going to present her works to you after Navina. She is still engaged in photographing Corbusier buildings outside. She said she'll come a little while later. And then we have Tasneem Mehta. She's also on the way. She'll be joining us in a few moments. We are very proud, very privileged, very honored that people from all over the country who have made difference in the field of art and culture and thinking on art are here amongst us to share their thoughts and also enrich this modern city, which is painstakingly designed, maintained, and given impetus by our leaders, our bureaucrats. We are really proud of you and proud of the audience as well.
I will run you through a few pictures, paintings, and comment on that by quoting largely from her very expressive and beautiful letters. Erotic painting and sculpture could not possibly have been inspired by religious fervor. As a matter of fact, I think all art, not excluding religious art, has come into being because of sensuality. A sensuality so great that it overflows the boundaries of the mere physical. How can one feel the beauty of a form, the intensity or the subtlety of a color, the quality of a line, unless one is a sensualist of the eyes? Yes, I admit. Can we shift? Come, move. These are a couple that she does in Paris. Can we shift? Okay. Yes, I admit, few women can paint. And I think that is because they are, as a general rule, not passionate souls, but sentimentalists. However, there are one or two exceptions. Suzanne Valadon, for instance, and a girl, Marie-Louise, I knew. If ever you come to Simla, I will show you several of her pictures. They're strange little paintings worthy of El Greco's. Marie-Louise, by a strange coincidence, also dies about the same time as Amrita in 1941. They are the same age. Suzanne Valadon, between 1865 and 1938. Here are two examples of her work, a nude and Catherine in washtub, was the one successful woman post-impressionist painter of the period, although Amrita's own work has little in common pictorially with the robustness verging on coarseness of Valadon's nudes. Amrita herself hated all these references to gender. When she was once awarded a prize for the best work by a lady artist in India, she wrote, "I do dislike this type of distinction. It rather smacks of concession due to the feebler sex." Her sister, Indira, was the subject of this audacious composition. This was Amrita's most suggestive nude. In sleep, conventions of the academic nude have been raised fleetingly by a reminiscence of Paul Gauguin, whose work she had admired during a visit to the National Gallery in London a few months before painting this in 1933. Oh, I've just seen a picture of Gauguin. I wanted to kneel in front of it. It was so beautiful. You would have loved it, she writes to her friend Denise Proto. European artists have been painting nudes for a long time. That women artists started to unclad the female body and to exhibit it in all its naked beauty was of a much later date. One must remember that the École des Beaux-Arts in Paris only started to admit women artists as late as 1897. During Amrita's tour of South India in 1937, she writes to her sister, I may have sold your nude to Nawab Salah Jung, after the Nizam, the richest man in Hyderabad, if I were a sycophant. He came to the exhibition and asked for those 2 pictures to be sent to his palace. He's supposed to be a connoisseur and is a collector. He has millions of rupees worth of junk, at the same time as beautiful jade and good Mughal and Rajput paintings in his palace. But he invited us to see his collection, and when I saw the Lord Leightons, the Watts, the Bougereaus amassed there, and everybody in the party spouted admiration and praise, I felt so sick that when he asked me what I thought of them, I asked him in return how on earth anybody with any taste could buy Leightons, Bougereaus, and Watts when there were Cézannes, Van Goghs, and Gauguins in the market. Sometime later, therefore, he decided that he had no use for these cubist pictures, namely your nude. I was, of course, furious, as he had kept us on tenterhooks for several days and even delayed our departure by keeping the pictures at his place, and was therefore glad that I hadn't prostituted myself morally, even if it had cost one a few thousand rupees. Funny that I, who can accept a present without the least pang of conscience, should not be able to say that a bad picture is good, even if it is in my interest to do so. Karl Kandalawala once remarked, her sales would have been better had she been a little less tactless. Miss Sher-Gil was not in the least charming when it came to a discussion on art, and she had no business sense at all. Denise Brotteau, in an article, wrote in 1933 about this painting. The memory of one of her most recent pictures still haunts me. A woman seated in a pose as unaesthetic as possible, with disheveled hair and ravaged breast, and in her eye all the misery of besotted humanity. From where has this young girl learned to see life with such pitiless eyes and this absence of illusions? Amrita had just turned 20 when she painted this professional model, which she proudly describes as her first successful essay at art. Amrita represents herself half nude in this self-portrait as Tahitian in a 3/4 profile view, an intimation, as it were, of shedding one identity and adopting another at precisely the moment when her Parisian sojourn was nearing its end. The year 1934 in which she painted this was also when she decided to return to India. It was here that she would arrive at not only a more nuanced application of Gauguin and other European painters, but also a more profound understanding of the ambitions of her own art. Towards the end of 1933, she writes, I began to be haunted by an intense longing to return to India, feeling in some strange, inexplicable way that there lay my destiny as a painter. My professor had often said that judging by the richness of my coloring, I was not really in my element in the great studios of the West, that my artistic personality would find its true atmosphere in the color and light of the East. Amrita's creative period spanned exactly 7 years. 3 Girls, her first painting done in 1935 in India, reveals a subtle reorientation of the pictorial language in terms of what she had retained from the scrutiny of Gauguin's Tahitian works. Incidentally, these 3 sisters are Amrita's relatives. They sat for this painting. Almost till the time that I felt the urge to go to India, I had been painting in the purely Western, in fact almost academic style, placing the stress principally on the execution, which was considered to be extremely brilliant. But as soon as I put my foot on Indian soil, not only in subject and spirit, but also in technical expression, my painting underwent a great change, becoming more fundamentally Indian. It was a vision of a winter in India, desolate yet strangely beautiful, of endless tracts of luminous yellow-gray land, of dark-bodied, sad-faced, incredibly thin men and women who move silently, looking almost like silhouettes, and over which an indefinable melancholy reigns. It was different from the India voluptuous, colorful, sunny, and superficial, the India so false to the tempting travel posters that I had expected to see. I realized my real artistic mission then to interpret the life of Indians, and particularly the poor Indian pictorially, to paint those silent images of infinite submission and patience, to depict their angular brown bodies, strangely beautiful in their ugliness, to reproduce on canvas the impression their sad eyes created on me, to interpret them with a new technique, my own technique. I wish to be an interpreter of the atrocious psychological misery that abounds in our country and which has made a profound impression on me. Art, it is my conviction, must be connected with the soil if it is to be vital. She later refers to this period and this particular painting, Man in White, done in 1935, as her romantic phase, great soulful eyes in a melancholy face. Of hill men and hill women, one of her more fully achieved works, the most notable features are the simplification and stylization of forms that are basic to the modernist credo of picture making, but of which Amrita only took heed after her return to India. Despite her reliance on the posed scene, on painting from the model, her interests appear to have been in creating a figural type that would be both emblematic and iconic. Pictorially, this means a broad handling that leans towards mass and color for establishing the overall design, as in the expanse of the draperies conspicuous in both pictures. The verticality and somewhat stylized elongation of the figures confers upon them a rather statuesque presence. Amrita had a brief, passionate affair with Malcolm Muggeridge, an English journalist who was stationed for a short while in Simla in 1935. Talking about love and sensuality in another context, she writes to Carl, "You are wrong. I wasn't unhappy because I had fallen in love. I am always in love. But fortunately for me and unfortunately for the party concerned, I fall out of love, or rather fall in love with someone else before any damage can be done. You know the type of alcoholic who stops drinking at the merry stage? Consequently, my emotional equilibrium is seldom upset. I feel, in fact, that one has to be in this state, a state of absolute calm, with no preoccupations of any sort, not even interests outside it, a complete though receptive void, to enjoy any form of art, and particularly to create it. That is why I don't believe in the theory of the struggling artist who creates his masterpieces under the inspiring influence of hunger, or a muse in the shape of the lady of his heart." When Amrita paints his portrait of her father and my grandfather, Singh Sher-Gil is 65, and his eyesight is failing him, a tragedy for this man of letters. He was a nationalist, whereas the rest of his family were British loyalists, an independent, if reclusive scholar. He loved carpentry, was passionate about photography. We can see a lot of his work in the museum next door, in the gallery next door. He was a stargazer, an introvert, a dandy, an abiding pessimist, if not a melancholic, an eccentric and somewhat Tolstoyan figure. There was a very strong bonding between father and daughter, even though Singh Sher-Gil referred to Amrita's paintings as your horrors, albeit teasingly. About the incomprehension and harsh criticism of the other art critics, barring Karl Kandalawala, she wrote, "It is curious, not to say somewhat ironical, that these very Indian artists who spend their lives concealing the tragic face of India behind rose bars, and who can't even justify their escapism by original or powerful pictorial interpretations, should decry my work because it is not what, according to them, true interpretations of India should be. To those who say that I look at India with the eyes of a foreigner, I am amazed that at least they concede that I am a sympathetic foreigner. I answer, granting that it is not from within, granting that I am just Kipling turned sympathetic, granting that my work smells of the West, in the face of the blindness, or worse still, voluntary blindness of most Indian artists, isn't it something that I should see? On the 15th of January 1937, she writes, "At Cape Comorin, where I have been for 10 days working, I have painted a largish composition, a woman with 2 children on an apple green background. The figures are painted in dark red and raw sienna and are dressed in white. I'm fairly satisfied with it. I feel I have assimilated Ajanta to some extent. What is so endearing about the impressions recorded in Amrita's letters is what they reveal of her desire to be seduced, enthralled, transported by all that she was discovering. And not only art, as the vivid descriptions of the South Indian landscape attest. In a letter to her sister from Trivandrum, she writes, "I wish you were here. This is a wonderful place. Some 9 miles from here, there is a spot on the seashore where I should like to live. Just the sea, coconut forests, the naked fishermen, and silence. There is a little bungalow there, quite primitive, for travelers to stay, very cheap, where I wish I could spend months and months each year and paint and paint." This painting is incidentally here in the museum. The people, men, women, and children, are extraordinarily beautiful. The women wear a bodice and a dhoti, leaving the middle portion of their body naked. Both the men and women wear white exclusively, and I tell you, the general impression is fascinating. Imagine a background of rich emerald green vegetation, coconut palm, banana, all the large-leaved decorative trees one sees in the paintings of Ajanta. The earth is in most places red ochre in color. Little mud huts, sometimes red, sometimes yellow, according to the color of the earth, with triangular thatched roofs, slightly Chinese in style, snuggle at the foot of enormous coconut trees and are a fit setting for the people. The Chinese were in contact with the Travancoreans many centuries ago. Their influence is manifest in the ancient frescoes of Travancore temples. I don't know how I will ever resign myself to living and painting in Simla, or for that matter, anywhere in North India, after seeing the South. I saw Kathakali dancing at Trivandrum. It was a revelation, grotesque and subtle at the same time, an unusual combination, magnificent. Amrita is enamored and greatly impressed by the frescoes in the Matan Cherry Palace in Cochin, done between 17th and 19th century. They range from large compositions with almost life-size figures to entire walls covered with small figures and interwoven in the most intricate design, so that sometimes one feels one is looking at a tapestry, so highly decorative is it, instead of a painting. They are done in tempera on plaster walls. It is only when one starts copying them. I've been at it for the last 3 days. Unfortunately, I have only paper and a few elementary watercolors at my disposal, that one realizes what an astounding technique these people had, and what an amazing knowledge of form and power of observation they possessed. Curiously enough, unlike the slender forms of Ajanta, the figures are extremely massive and heavy here. The drawing perhaps the most powerful I have ever seen, even more powerful than Ajanta, although Ajanta is superior from the painting point of view, particularly in the treatment of drapery and jewelry, where not a single line is left to chance and everything is drawn with the utmost precision and virility. In spirit, it is as different from Ajanta as the Flemish masters are from Byzantine art. Bride's toilet can also be seen as a study in the body language of native types. The juxtaposition of the fair complexioned bride with her dark-skinned attendants, the turn of her head, the delicately arched eyebrows, all point to comparable features in the Ajanta frescoes. 2 sketches that she does in Ajanta. So, South Indian villagers going to market mark the end of a period in which the experiences in form and color derived from Ajanta and Ellora dominated Amrita's work. Perhaps she realized that it was the furthest she could go in the assimilation of Ajanta. While in Bombay, Amrita's eyes had been opened to various schools of miniature painting, and so she turned to another facet of the Indian pictorial tradition. The new orientation was signaled by a change of scale and choice of subjects. The figures were no longer abstracted from their everyday surroundings. 2 paintings of 1937, and we are now spanning a period from her beginning, that was in 1935. This is exactly 2 years, and I'll try to point out the difference in the development in her style. Two paintings of 1937, Siesta and Storyteller, evinced the rather more intimate tenor that would come to dominate her work in the following years. The Bahari miniatures to which these works are beholden suggested a condensed and at the same time color-suffused pictorial composition. I have painted a lot of smallish, change please, compositions in the similar spirit since. I have a need of expressing myself in this manner. I've been curiously happy the last few months. I don't know why. These little compositions are the expression of my happiness, and that is why perhaps I'm particularly fond of them and will always have a tender spot in my heart for them, even when my calm vanishes and the little compositions along with it. Another quiet composition, a group of women in a field in which I want to bring out the contrast between the hot reds and greens one finds in the early Rajput miniatures that I love so. I have tried, though it is very, very difficult, to give all the figures in these pictures the flat relief. I am avoiding painting in volume of cardboard figurines pasted onto the canvas. A hill scene. Green hillsides, green upon green, rhododendron trees with stiff scarlet flowers, and a row of figures advancing towards the spectator. Little women in brilliant colors like parrots. In fact, there is something bird-like about them. Comical little profiles and small, thin legs. Is how Amrita describes this picture to Karl Kandalwala in a letter dated 1938. The figures tended to be rather like staffage, and this was a far cry indeed from the monumental effect of the hill men and hill women of 3 years earlier. I'm afraid our Lahore art critics have failed to grasp the significance of my latest work. Emotional appeal is still given preference over pictorial merit. They imagine that there is greater merit in spontaneity than in control, which they confuse with that which is studied merely because looking at it superficially, the former is more pleasing to the eye. If I really took art critics seriously, my progress would have ceased long ago. Another period of transition is approaching, one of greater reflection, of more conscious painting, more observation, and more stylization in the sense of nature. That seems a contradiction, but I hope to prove very soon that it isn't, and preceding it, a period of stagnation. Resting is the only picture she paints that year on her return from Hungary in July 1939. Dear Karl, she writes, on the 1st July 1940, the period of the man in white in Mother India, great soulful eyes and a melancholy face, romantic, you know. I've grown out of that sort of thing. The Mughals have taught me a lot. Looked at rightly, the Mughal portraitists can teach one everything almost that matters. Subtle yet intense, keenness of form, acute and detached, somewhat ironical observation, all the things I needed most at the time I got acquainted with them. I've done some smallish things in which this is very apparent, though of course they still lean mainly on color. They're very lovely as color. I am progressing in that direction too, though I do not attach so much importance to it, for color is my domain, and I am on terms of easy domination with it. My sense of form, on the other hand, is only developing now, and still has a strong tendency to evade me. It very often happens that I grasp it only for a short period, and only sections of my pictures are good as a consequence. But still, I consider it something that I master, even if as yet only in portions. Feeling impotent, dissatisfied, irritable, not even able to weep. There seem to be forces at work, elemental forces disrupting, throwing things out of equilibrium. The chaos and darkness of the lives of individuals, the wars, the earthquakes, floods, all seem to be indefinably interconnected. We are not alone. I see it everywhere. She writes to her friend Helen Chamanlal in April 1941. I haven't touched a brush or gone near a canvas for over 4 months. I don't know why. I'm gripped by a sort of fear whenever I think of working again, a sort of paralysis of the spirit. I suppose it could be explained by a very simple and obvious reason if I sat down to analyze it, but I just cannot bring myself to. I suppose one can get out of the habit of painting. The spell is suddenly broken now, and I'm working again, working with passion. I'm beginning to get interested in animals. Elephants, of course, first and foremost. Elephants, next one. Camels and buffaloes. I've just completed a little picture. 4 little girls weaving baskets. The background an acid lemon yellow. The children a medley of hot color. It's painted with all the desire, the greed almost that comes after a long abstinence. She writes in September 1941. 3 months later, she dies. This is the last unfinished painting, and that is the span of a short creative life of exactly 8 years. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Navina ji. The way you have described everything through your, lecture, I shouldn't call it a lecture, but I have to use a word for that. And a large body of work which we have been talking about and shown in such a quick succession without really losing the meaning and bringing things in its proper perspective. Thank you very much indeed. May I now invite Dayanita, please. Dayanita is doing a large project for Venice, and there was a chance that she couldn't make it because there was some serious problem which cropped up the last moment. She was there, but she made it just yesterday. She came and she's rushed, and I'm really, really thankful to her that she is made to Chandigarh to give this presentation.
Thank you, Diwan. I have great admiration for what you do here at Lalit Kala, so I had to be here. But thank you for inviting me. And I'm very happy to be in Chandigarh, having studied in the hills just above you. So it's all very nostalgic and all kinds of, I wanted to go to 18 sector market and thinking there'll be a little Chinese restaurant. I had no idea what had happened in Chandigarh in these last years. But I'm especially delighted to be speaking here because I've never had so many of my colleagues in the front row in the audience. So I'm very grateful that there's so many of them here listening and not at the Rose Garden where I would rather be. Tomorrow at 11:30, I think there's Mr. and Mrs. Rose competition. I would say not to be missed. I could start by saying that the book is really the form of my, is my form. It's the heart of my work. And I think I was literally born into it. It took me many years to realize it. But I'm going to show you an album that my mother made while she was pregnant with me, I suppose you would say. Girlfriends till he married Noni, hope so. All these photos had been carelessly thrown in a box. Hey, some respect for photography at least, 1960. So that's my mother making an album of all my father's girlfriends. My father was I believe, a great Casanova. And then my mother had put herself on the last page. Before I was born, my mother had made this book, and my childhood was just always lots and lots of albums, and every surface covered with glass and prints below. She was a photographer, but is a photographer, but more than that was a great archivist. So I think I was born into knowing that photography needs to be looked after, needs to take the form of an album. Personally, I hated photography because she always made me pose for her pictures, and she had a Zeiss icon, and then it would just take ages to focus. I was at National Institute of Design studying graphics, hoping to become a typographer, very inspired by Satyajit Ray, who was trying to make a type out of his Bengali-English combination. And I happened to go for a concert to photograph the moods of the person. The person happened to be Zakir Hussain. And I just wanted to quickly take pictures, like a lot of my colleagues here today said, we've got 1 minute, 30 seconds, we're going to do your picture, and that's what they did. And they're gone now, I think, all my colleagues. So I had thought I would do a similar thing. And an organizer just asked me to stop and pushed me. Now, thank God he pushed me, because I fell. I fell in front of an audience of about 1,000 people in the Baroda Palace Hall, in the Darbar Hall. So the organizer pushed me and I fell on my backside in front of this audience of about 1,000 people. I was 18, had just got a camera. I was deeply, deeply offended that I should fall on my backside in front of a hall full of people. And so I waited outside the auditorium for Zakir Hussain to come out and put my hands on my hips and said, Mr. Hussain, I'm a young student today. Someday I'll be an important photographer and then we'll see. And started to cry. And he gave me water and explained that if you want to photograph, you have to take permission. You can't just get onto stage and say you're going to photograph. And besides, Ravi Shankar had added a fret to his sitar. So he didn't want it documented. Fair enough. And then Zakir said, if you want, you can come to my hotel tomorrow morning and photograph me when I'm practicing. You'll get the same faces. And that was really the most important night in my life, sitting with my friends at NID trying to decide whether to go to a man's hotel room at 6 in the morning or not. And thank God the organizer pushed me, and thank God I went to Zakir's hotel room. And I realized in that night, this was my ticket to freedom. I could do what I like, I could be who I like, I could go where I like, I could travel with whoever I like. So it was freedom. So it wasn't really some great love for photography. Photography was just the annoyance that delayed every departure in my childhood. But it was this idea that I could, really just get onto a bus with 10 musicians and travel for 3 months. And I thought nothing in life can give me that kind of opportunity. So that's how I got drawn to the idea of being a photographer, not really quite knowing what it means, and then photographed Zakir for many years. And at the time that I was leaving NID, I was able to make a book about him. And I thought that's what photography is. I did my own interviews, I did my own layouts and used my own favorite Optima typeface and designed the book. And at NID, they were okay with me doing that because it was book design. It wasn't photography. So that's how I managed to just push my agenda for photography every time I had the opportunity to make, whether it was a record jacket, anything. And then after I came out of NID, I really, really wanted to be one of the boys, to wear the vest of the photographers and go to all the disasters that they would photograph. And so I went and I met the king of all photographers and said, sir, please give me a chance. I'll make coffee. I'll catalog your negatives. And he just sort of brushed me off and he said, you're a woman and, experience motherhood. What is there for you to do in photography? I was completely devastated, and I decided, or rather somebody decided for me, that it would be better if I just went away. And that's what I did. I went to New York and traded my dowry with my mother and said, I'm not getting married, but if I do, I don't want a dowry, let me go to New York. So I went to New York and studied photography, came back, became a photojournalist, very romantic idea that my photography was going to change the world. And in 2 years, I realized that everything that they taught us in photo school really had no meaning, and nothing changed except my bank balance. And I became known as India's AIDS photographer. It was a terrible time for me. And then I thought the way forward for me was either to become an activist and really work with the children of the prostitutes, if that's what I cared so much about, or to be a photographer. I couldn't be a photojournalist and try to do both. I felt that was not going to work out. So that's the book I made with Zakir. You can't get it now for love or for money, because it was pulped on the footpath because nobody would buy it. I think it was first sold for 10 rupees and finally it was all pulped. And I was all these years so embarrassed by it that I never used to even show it. So this is a new thing to make it part of my CV. And then when I was studying in New York, I was introduced to the work of Robert Frank among many other photographers. And this is a confession, but an important one. I'd been brought up, like all of us, not to steal and all that, no? But this was the one time that I did steal because I felt if I didn't have this book of Robert Frank, I couldn't be a photographer. So I went into the bookshop of my own school, ICP, and stole this book on a winter morning in a big black coat, and stole it with my friend Michael Richter. So this was about 87. Cut to 97, I stopped doing photojournalism, dying to make family portraits, because I think, okay, if I make family portraits, somebody will put them up on their walls, and somehow I will have made an archive. So that was all I wanted from life, because my colleagues were not interested in my joining them, and I thought, let me make family photos, and if 300 families have them up in their homes, then that's enough. That's enough of a contribution to photography. So I started making family portraits, but it was very difficult to get the money. The families didn't want to pay me. No magazines at that time wanted pictures of well-to-do families, but I wanted to make the pictures. I got a call saying, Robert Frank would like to know how much money you need to complete your project. And I thought, you know, the FBI is behind me, that this theft of mine has been caught and I'm going to be trapped into something. So I just said, oh, $10,000 would be fantastic. So they said, okay. And then I really didn't know what to make of it. Then I thought it's a crank call, but a check arrived for $10,000. And those $10,000 led me to privacy. All my photographs done in 97 and 98 were done with that $10,000. I would sleep in friends' houses, and I could give prints to the families. And of course, my reaction was, oh, what does Robert Frank want from me? And the message back from him was that if you don't want the money, throw it into the sea. It's for you to continue that project that I was told about. So this was the second amazing story. The first was this organizer pushing me, and you know, God bless his soul wherever he is. And then there was this Robert Frank grant. I mean, today if somebody gave me $10 million, it wouldn't mean the same thing as that $10,000. And that allowed me to get a certain, I don't know if confidence is the right word, but I met Mona on a regular assignment making a book about, you at that time as a photojournalist, 89, going back a little bit, to be taken seriously, you had to do a eunuch story. Went to photograph Mona. Mona thought it was for New York Times. Actually, it was for London Times, and took my film away. And that formed this incredible friendship, which continues even today. I think she's, you know, with my mother, the most important person in my life and the most consistent person in my life. So I was able to just continue photographing Mona, and we made a book together. And some of you may know the story. I went to Walter Keller in Zurich, and we were making a book about all my work. And he said, he looked at the Mona work, and he said, this is amazing. We have to make a book just about Mona. And I said, no, we can't do that because Mona is a hijra and she doesn't like to be published. People always want to write about her castration. She doesn't like that. So he said, no, we're going to make the book and you write to her. So I sent her a fax through my mother, saying world's best publisher would like to make a book on your unique self. Do you agree? She sent a fax back saying, whole world calls me eunuch. You call me unique. First you tell me which is true, then I will answer you. So this is the third lucky coincidence, because the fax arrives on Walter's table. And he says, this is incredible. She's going to write the book. And then all my prejudices come up, and I say, Walter, you sit in Zurich. You have no idea, A, what it means to be a hijra, second, what it means to be thrown out from the hijras, and then to be living in a graveyard. How do you think she's going to do it? And she did. She dictated letters to Walter Keller, dear Mr. Walter, and she told him her story, full of lies, full of contradictions, as all biography is. And Walter left it all there. So if you read the book, which I highly recommend, it's a beautiful story. It's really, really, it's a very moving story and great strength in it. She told her story as she wanted to, and then after the book came out, when BBC came to make a film about us, she said, this book, all lies. You give me money, I'll tell you my true story. And my film is, my life sounds a bit like a Hindi film, but it's just one great meeting after the other. Bad ones in between also, and the usual heartbreak and all of that. But some other great meetings. So Gerhard Steidl, this wonderful publisher, who really enabled me to go the full way with books. I went to meet him when there was a show in Berlin with the family portraits that Robert Frank had given the money for. And he said, do you want to make a catalog or an artist's book? And I said, you know, what is the difference? I don't know. And he said, well, if it's an artist's book, you have to make every decision, including the paper, the binding thread, the end papers, and of course the sequence and size and all of that. So I said, well, I'd like to make an artist's book. And so he sent the curator away, and we sat together and put privacy, built up the sequence, and really he has these long tables which I've simulated in my house in Goa, and it's all done with scissors, scotch tape, cutting up the prints. So nothing on the computer. Finally, of course, it goes onto the computer, and finally the most beautiful printing in the world is done in the same publishing house. But Gerhard says that it's really important that we make books with our hands, because finally they're going to be these physical objects. And he thinks a problem with bookmaking is that it's all done on the computer, and the first time you really hold something in your hands is when it comes back from the press. So I've learned a lot from Gerhard, and also received tremendous, tremendous support from him, something that has allowed me to continue to make work away from the gallery and away from the museum, and to sort of do my own thing, because there is this crazy man in Göttingen in Germany who will publish what I say, whatever I bring to him. And so I think very carefully about what I take to him, but as long as I'm pushing myself, as long as I'm challenging the last book, he's happy to go ahead with this. So we made a book, an accordion fold book of photographs that I had put together during my residency at the Gardner Museum. And the idea with this book was, again, the museum said, do you want to make an artist's book? And I said, really, what's an artist's book? They said, well, an artist decides everything. I said, in that case, I'd like to decide that the book is not sold, but it's just disseminated, because that is really the aspect of photography that I love the most, the dissemination. And they said, okay, but how do you plan to distribute it? So I had a distributors list, 50 friends all over the world. Each one got an edition of 10. So if it was Sadanand, then the book would say SM 1 of 10, SM 2 of 10, SM 3 of 10, and he would get 10 books. And he has to decide what to do with them. And so Jonathan in Birmingham said, oh, this is too exclusive. I'm going to give these 10 books to the first 10 people I meet today. So the bus driver, the security guard, the receptionist, the curator who came to see him, the books were distributed. Similarly, all my 50 friends distributed the books. They didn't have to tell me who got the books or nothing. So the books just went out into the world. And then I had the great honor to meet Sol Levitt much, much later, in sort of 2005, I think. And so I thought, what do I take Sol Levitt? And you don't take someone like him a bottle of wine or a bunch of flowers. So I took him one of my edition of the Chair's book. And he looked at it and he laughed and he said, "You can keep it, Dayanita. I have 3 already." So I think what stayed with me from photojournalism really was the dissemination of photography. And that is something that I'm always in a bit of a, I can't say conflict, but it's a challenge to be part of the art world and still be able to use the dissemination part of photography, which is what I enjoy the most. So books are really the main thing. I often say that the exhibition is just a catalogue of the works that are in the book, because the book is the work. I made Go Away Closer because I made this picture that is behind me as well. I photographed Poppy, who I've been photographing since she was born, and this was, typical afternoon, comes back from school, bad mood, and this auntie from Delhi is there with her camera, and so she was, sort of leave me alone. I took that picture and it suddenly said, "Go away closer to me." Those were the words. And then I went back to Delhi because I recognized the emotion of that picture. And I went into my archive and I found all these photographs that were actually my rejects. They were what I used to call my sidees because they weren't part of whatever I was photographing at that time. And so this is how Go Away Closer, this slim little book, got made, which title? Just 30 photographs, very, very carefully choreographed in their sequencing. My kitchen in Delhi and the little black books are what I call my kitchen museum. And this is how I like to travel. I work with a medium format camera, and I like to cut my contact sheets myself, cut them, and make these little piles of photographs that I travel with, because who knows what mood comes and what book I want to make where. So I must have all these little prints with me. I don't use digital as yet. On the street, somebody said to me, "Heritage, heritage." So these boxes and these little prints are very important to me, and also because what started to happen was I would travel with people with some great minds. I've really been very, very lucky in the people that I have had opportunity to travel and engage with, and I never knew how to thank them. I couldn't write a letter saying thank you. It was so whatever. So I'm not very good with my vocabulary, with my spoken vocabulary. So I thought I would make these little books for them. This moleskin book, which is called a Japanese book, accordion fold, and I would paste in these little contact sheets because just from the travel that I had made. So I went to Allahabad with a friend, and then I was photographing in Nehru's house, and I put that work together, not really to make it about Allahabad or Nehru's house, but it was a letter to this friend full of little clues and secrets of things that we had spoken about, not really taking pictures of them. I made a book like that for Atul for his exhibition in Bombay. I hope he still has it. So then I made one for Steidl because we went to Calcutta together, and when he saw it, he said, "This is amazing, we have to publish it." And I said, "No, you can't publish it. These are very personal letters. I have made them for one person." And he said, "Take 7 of them, it'll be a fantastic box." And I still think it's the best work I've ever done, this little box sent a letter. And then I was in Calcutta, and remember, at heart, I think I started off with photojournalism. So that part never went away, the dissemination part, that cover story of the Illustrated Weekly, which meant about 100,000 people would get to see the pictures that you put there or more. I don't know the numbers. But I was used to that, and the art world, the gallery world was just too limiting. So this box gave me great freedom. Went to Calcutta, went to Park Street, past this jewelry store, empty vitrines, walked inside, introduced myself, and said, "I'm Dayanita Singh, I'm a photographer." And he said, "Yes, I know you, I admire your work. What can I do for you?" I said, "Give me your vitrines." So this is January 2008. So I go inside into the vitrines and position my center letter books inside and come out. And I just got a New Year card in January 2013. The books are still there. And the Panwala, who sits just to the side of this photograph, is the sort of unofficial guide who explains the concept of this box, which has 7 little books. And, you know, for him, I don't think it's the letter part that is so interesting. He prefers to call it, ye Nehru ji ka ghar hai, aur ye Bombay ki tasveerein hain, isme Gandhi ji ka bhi ghar hai. So that's his reading of it. And then there are 3 beggar sisters. If any one of you have been to Park Street, you'll see them outside Fleury's. They're, 2 of them, I think, are crippled. So they also hobble around and then guide people through the work. So I have my own permanent museum on Park Street, and for all the people who worry about museum footfalls, I don't know what can compare with Park Street in Calcutta. I can go to the Ganges View Hotel and Shashank says, "Are, is bari koi kaam nahi lai." I can pull out my box, have an exhibition, and you know, when somebody steals one of the books, I just feel it's fine, it's okay. I did it once, and if somebody feels they have to have it, it's okay. It's a compliment. And then I sort of insist with my gallery that they put them in the Basel Art Fair, and they say, "Dayanita, we can't put something that costs 50 euros in an art fair," but it sort of becomes like, you know, you have to, and so they listen, and then, you know, NGMA Bombay, and I said, no, I'm going to, the idea that I could put a mass-produced book in a museum means a lot to me. So whenever I get a chance, when people say we want to have an exhibition, the first condition is that we must show center letter. And this is how it was shown at the Photo Museum in Winterthur, in Madrid. And of course, I'm very interested in sort of library of images and making archives. And again, it's at a bit of a, I don't want to call it problem, but the art world would like 1 image. The art world would like 3 images. I would like to have 100 images, maybe 500 images. So books is really essential for me to be able to do all of that. So this is the photograph that David sent me in January 2013. Sent a letter, still in the vitrines. That's Calcutta portraits being taken away from an exhibition, taken off the walls and taken home. Peter Negi, the gallerist, was very happy because he had no shipping charges. So now 108 of these portraits hang in 66 homes in Calcutta. And I had to make them in these big frames because earlier when I would give prints to the families, they would cut up my photographs to fit the frames that they had. So if it was a heart-shaped frame, and some of them, if I gave bigger prints, would put them under the bed because they were too embarrassed. So I gave them with these big prints, and now they have to put them up. So the photos just kept disappearing from the wall. That was a very, very special week for me. And this one photograph got left behind because she had died and the family had moved to America. At a certain point, I was standing on top of a tower in a Birla factory on a commercial, not a commercial, like a Fortune magazine assignment. And it was from this series. I was very high up with a harness. I have vertigo anyway, so I was not comfortable there, but the scene that I saw was incredible, and I thought, I wish I had some black and white film with me. But I didn't, and the light had gone, and I thought if I go down, I'll never make it back in time, and I'll never have the courage to come up again. So I took these photographs on color film, thinking I would print in black and white somehow, because I wanted the pictures so badly. I'd never seen this kind of scene. Industry was very new to me. And these pictures came back from the lab, and all the contact sheets were blue because I was using daylight film after sunset. And I thought, this is it. This is the way I can work with color. Up to now, I had never worked with color. And then made Blue Book, which is a book of postcards. And this continued into Dream Villa, where I started to photograph at night. So I can photograph color at night and black and white in day. And then the postcard book was made because Gerhard wouldn't let me make another accordion fold. He said we can't repeat ourselves. And then came the time to make Dream Villa. And he said, you know, I made a very pristine book, sort of one side photograph, one side white, which sort of makes it precious. And he said, I don't think so. Then I put them side by side, and then it becomes a diptych. So that's something else. And we went on for 4 days, 5 days, just making different permutations and combinations. And finally, I got so fed up that I took the photographs and just folded them in half, pasted them together, and said, here, Gerhard Steidl, here's a book even you'll say no to. And he said, this is perfect, we do it. And so Dream Villa is this very tightly bound book with the gutter running through the middle. You can't even leave it open. It has no page numbers. And what this does is, if you want to talk to me about an image, or if you want to mention an image to someone, you have to find your own vocabulary for it. There's no page number. There are no titles, something I had done a while ago but continued here. And it just won't stay open. It just keeps closing on itself. It's very tightly bound. So it's irritating for people because it's these beautiful, beautiful colors that you get from using daylight film at night. Glossy paper. The actual prints are sea prints. They're so beautiful that you want to lick them. They're really so nice. And then to put the gutter in the middle was a great pleasure for me and great annoyance for everyone. I don't know if we sold any of this book. And then I started to get interested with the idea of projection. And I think this again had to do with my ideas of photography that go back to that time of photojournalism, and the idea that with a projection, I wasn't restricted to one image, that I could again build my own sequences, I could have 500 images if I wanted, and that it was all ephemeral, that there was no frame, there was no paper, that you just had to hold the edit in your head if you could. You would only see one image. Here we did 2 projections. And then I came to the idea of photo fiction, and that's how House of Love emerged. So by this time, I had really started to feel that photography is at a dead end, that it's not enough to be making photographs, that I could make photographs with my eyes shut. And now with the kind of technology, all of you could do the same. You don't even have to open your eyes to take a picture. Shoot away, and so what does it mean? And I started to feel that really photography has become the truly democratic medium now, because now everybody has access to photography. So it's like saying everybody has access to words. So you can make some beautiful words. So you can make a sentence perhaps. But so what? Maybe you can pull a paragraph together. So big deal. What more is going to happen with photography then? Because it's no longer enough just to make photographs. And I started to look to literature that I had got quite immersed in by now. And I thought, until we can find other forms in photography, maybe we can think of literature and say, you know, I have all these photographs, or with these photographs, or what am I going to do? Do I want to write a poem, or do I want to write a piece of fiction? Do I want to do biography? Do I want to do a film script? And that perhaps that would give different directions to how to work with photography. And I thought, I want to make a book of short stories, and I'm very inspired by Calvino. And like all inspiration, I derive a lot from him, and I don't know, stolen is not the word, but I have taken a lot from him, including completely imitating the cover of this book. This is Adam One Afternoon, one particular rendering of it. So I told the designer, same typeface, everything. It has to look like a Calvino book in the literary section. And it was designed with the exact size of Austerlitz, another book that's very important to me. So that you would find it, you would think that, oh, this should be in the literature section. I thought, why can't people read photographs? When will people start spending some time with photographs like they do with a piece of fiction or poetry. And so I made House of Love. It's a book of short stories, and the titles, most of them are stolen from Calvino. And Vikram Seth is another great source for me. I use his poetry, I use his titles, I cut up his poems and paste them into my books. And this is Continuous Cities, obviously with the reference to Invisible Cities. So this is all that night color and the sort of hallucinogenic color that I'm quite familiar with now. And this was another project that, I don't know how to pronounce it, it's called Point d'Ironie or something like that. Point. Agnes B. and Hans Ulrich Olbrist and Christian Bultansky have this project where they invite an artist to do something with 8 sheets of paper. And they print 200,000 copies of it, and it's disseminated in all these museums. I think some were sent to Chandigarh as well. And so I was invited to do something. And I had just finished working on Dream Villa, and I thought I'm going to make a reading list for anyone who cares who's interested in a reading list. Here it is. So I put my photographs as though they were the covers for these books that have been the most important for me. The most important photo book, the book of photography that's the most significant for me, is Calvino's Difficult Loves. Any of you interested in actually the visual arts, it would be a great book to read. So that's the cover, Difficult Loves. Then Shadow Lines, Amitav Ghosh, Running in the Family. The authors' names were not given because I thought someone might go to Google and you put Running in the Family, and then you know it's on Dache, and then maybe you read the book. It's all a bit far-fetched, but distributing this was fantastic. We had a release for it at the art fair. I think Atul was in the audience there too. And then we gave it in the audience, then we came out and gave it to the security, and then we gave it was cold, it was winter, we gave it to the beggars on Lodi Road from the car, and just kept distributing this issue wherever we could. It never came back to me in a paper bag, though some of my Zakir pictures have come back to me in paper bags. So I don't know how it got used, whether anybody framed it, but this is A3 size. So it's very beautifully produced and immensely satisfying for me. A Room of One's Own, Virginia Woolf, essential for every person. And I too don't like all this women category and all that, but essential. Jeff in Venice, Death in Varanasi. A lot of my editing and sequencing comes from studying Jeff Dyer and Michael Ondaatje. I really can say that I don't look to anyone in my discipline. It's really literature and cinema that informs the way the work moves and shifts and changes all the time. The Idea of India, of course, I'm very partial to. All You Who Sleep Tonight, Vikram Seth's book of poetry, and Austerlitz of Sebald, my favorite photography book. And then, you know, there was the retrospective kind of phase arrived, and which was very annoying for me because a chronology is expected in a retrospective, which is not my chronology. Who can really say, could Dream Villa have happened without the Mona work? Could Blue Book have happened without the I Am As I Am work? And so now I wouldn't do something like this, but this was a big book chronologically done with all my works, with some pretty impressive writing. But this is where I am now. This is my main book. This is what I wanted to really share with you. This is about 6 feet tall, and it has in it, on the outer surface, it has 40 images, and inside another 100 images. And then you can open one flap so to say, of the book. And you get this corner, and you can open the other flap, and you get a wall. And these are all pictures of files. Recently, for the last 2 years, I've been obsessed with rooms full of files. And then you can go to the structure, and you can, it's clear I've just returned from Japan, and you can unscrew the little sticks, and you can change the photographs. So a gallerist's nightmare, 140 images being presented as one work, and that it keeps changing, that there's no one. I'm terribly tired of the idea of this one image in a frame. And so this is what I've started to do now, to make these boxes and structures that can keep changing all the time, that I don't want a single image to be there. So now at the Kiran Nadar Museum in Delhi, I have a wall, I have a room where there are lots of nails. I should have put some pictures of that, I'm sorry. And a box of 52 prints. So whenever I feel like, I go and change the images, and most of the nails have nothing on them, there's just nails. And sometimes I might do it with a friend, sometimes I do it on my own. And that's the part that I really enjoy about photography now, that I've been able to make these ways to get around the very tight structures of the art world, that I've been able, and books have allowed me that, and I guess with age a certain confidence to say 52 images is one work, or 140 images is one work. You know, to my colleagues that don't come from the photo background, it doesn't seem like anything new, but there's terrible limitations put on in the art world when it comes to photography, when you come through photography. So then there are all these strange structures that you have to adhere to. And it's not that I make books in response to that, but books is where I have my freedom, total freedom, projections, and now these structures, which, and I hope in a few months to have an exhibition where there are only these structures. So you just have to walk through this labyrinth of, I don't know, it'll probably have more than 1,000 images. So that's all that I wanted to talk about.
Thank you, Dayanita. In fact, it was a good beginning. It kind of, describes your journey, the way we began. First with Navina's, little hiccup, then with yours. Maybe it was destined and designed. And see, maybe
Fine by me.
50 years down the line or 100 years down the line, when the video which we are making, if somebody sees that video, they'll see that with that sound, with that music which is coming, maybe people will think it was designed by Dayanita.
Absolutely. I'm going to go and join them right now.
Yeah. So, any questions, please?
Only if Navina comes as well.
My question is to you. Most of the pictures are black and white. So, any specific reason, or if you'd like to share that?
I find color very difficult. I find color of daylight tends to dominate, and I'm not able to create as much of an atmosphere as I can with black and white. I can put more of a focus into where I want to draw your attention in black and white than in color. I think it's something like that. But now I shoot in both. I shoot a lot of color, but only at night.
And what are the things which are keeping you away from the digital world? As you said, you're not using that kind of camera or something.
I like the idea that in my bag, I have my camera, I have my light meter, and I have these 2 boxes of film. I'm showing it to you because these days your generation doesn't know all this, no? So this is film. And this is medium format film. 12 exposures. So I have 10 rolls, which is 120 frames, for these 2 days of my shooting in Chandigarh. It's quite a lot. I wouldn't normally shoot 10 rolls in 2 days, but because I'm here and I didn't want to run short of film, it's anyway finishing this year. Kodak will have no more film at the end of this year. So I have to think quite carefully about what I want. I also use a tripod, which is in the car, but which I'm going to get and then go to the rose garden. I like the way analog slows me down. I have to take a meter reading. After all of these years, I still don't trust myself completely, and I will take the reading, and then I will set my camera, and then I will realize that the film is over. Then I have to change, I have to take the whole back off. I'm happy to demonstrate that for you. But it's very much that process that keeps me with film. So now, of course, I'm thinking about digital because I have to. I don't really have to because I have photographed now for 30 years. So I have a huge archive of images, and I've used maybe 10% of it. So I have a lot of work. So I could choose not to do digital and just work with my archive, which is very fascinating, especially when you start mixing the archive. And if I go to digital, I thought, I don't like the idea of shooting in color and converting it to black and white. That's one problem. The solution for that is the Leica monochrome. It's also very expensive. But that is the one camera. Kodak made one before, but that's the only camera where the sensor is made just for black and white. So I think I would have to get that camera if there was no more film. But what I enjoy very much is working like this, you know, with the Hasselblad, looking down. I always have a very different point of view from my colleagues who are often a foot higher and with their cameras there. So look at the difference that we have. So it's not a surprise when you say that, you know, somebody might say, oh, I can tell that's a Dayanita picture. It's really nothing more than the fact that I shoot from my belly. So I'm really shooting from a child's point of view, not even my own. So I think I would go to digital, but I need a lot of things from digital. I need the square format, and I need black and white. I can get the black and white on the Leica monochrome, but that doesn't give me the square format. The Hasselblad back gives me a slightly rectangular format as well. And performance for free.
Anyone else, please?
And Dayanita, the way you have worked and moved now from the book into the gallery, that's another mobility of the image. I just want to, both of you to reflect a bit on, you know, what this journey of the still image is all about, and how it constructs through you know, integrating with a different medium, how it can create a completely new story. Not that it's not been done before, but you know, it's fascinating to see these two journeys together. So whether, you know, you could pick on you know, how you worked with the still image, and you know, how that then became this very mobile film. It's hardly a half-an-hour film, but it spans an entire, you know, journey.
Yeah, well, thanks for that observation. As Daffy said at the beginning in my introduction, I come from journalism, and I worked with television in the days actually when we had film and not videos. So there was a period where you could declare your own time. Anyhow, that has passed. But for me, when I retired and this commission came, and I was asked to do something about Amrita, and I said, oh my God, I don't know anybody who's still alive who can talk on her, because that was how my documentary tradition worked. I spoke to people who were eyewitnesses or happened to be there. Now, this was a kind of course, I was very lucky because the family archive has been carefully kept from my mother, and then, of course, through Diwan and things. But to find a way of that just the images itself create another narrative. You still see that I don't quite trust them because I have this constant commentary. As somebody said, it's relentless. But that comes from my teaching. And I still haven't quite found a way, maybe that would be another project if I do that the images tell their own story without my help. And I was hoping to use the crutch of being the niece, so to film, to put in something personal, because otherwise anybody else could have done the film. You could have done the film. But what was special about me doing this film from my background? So that was, I don't think it's a challenge that I've been able to take up completely, but I'm not totally unhappy with the result. It was something completely new for me. I don't work with that otherwise.
And I've been trying to work with stills, actually failed quite badly, because I thought the Mona story was such an important story that it needs to be told to a larger audience. The publisher of the Mona book went bankrupt, and so the book is not available. And I thought, let me try and see if I can make a form. So I thought, brilliant, I'm going to take all these photographs and I'm going to make a movie. And I battled for 6 months with it because, again, I wanted the photographs to speak. I didn't want too much of the text. At the same time, you can't take Mona's story away from her. So worked on all that and finally gave up. Because I think I understood that there is only so far that a still photograph can go. So to really make a film with still photographs like Le Jeté, which is a great film, William Klein was asked to take those pictures for the film. So now if I wanted to make a film, film out of stills of Mona, I would photograph it for the film. But right now, the stills that I have from my previous project, each one is so complete in itself, there's no in between. And so either I thought I put my voice or I put random landscapes, but it was quite, I couldn't crack it. And I thought the music really helped here. In holding the stills together, apart from your commentary. And so I've now gone back to I sort of feel that maybe I love projection as a form, and I love this mixing up the archive. So, and if I try to look at something that's, say, 25 years of my life, Mona keeps popping up again and again. And maybe that's the way the projection needs to be. And maybe to really just say that I can go up to a projection, I might introduce some sound, but sound is a whole other field in itself. So I have failed at making that film, but my admiration for sound and film people has gone up even more than before. Photography is, it's different. I thought it would seamlessly just happen, but it was wonderful in your film.
Thank you.
Diwan, both Navina and Dayanita are such a dear friend, and I quite know their work and the way they work, but it's just sharing to all of you. I think, Navina, I remember, I think probably Sudhir also had asked you a question when you had this film shown in Bombay. But I have been thinking about it, that during the time when, of course, such a short life Amrita had, but already, she went to Ajanta, she went to South, but there was a Bengal school solidly working, with, and Rabindranath was very much there. Rabindranath present is still exists today for us, in a big way. So, and he was painting exactly at that time. Rabindranath was there, and Nandal Babu and Vinod Bihari, all this. So that whole, that Bengal school working and as a trying to, revive or a new thing, and that never sort of touched, or she didn't go that side, she didn't see that, or, if you know, or any letters or any notes, or whether she was familiar with?
She didn't, unfortunately, she never went to Calcutta. If she had gone there, then she would have found out about Shantiniketan. She obviously knew about Rabindranath Tagore, and she refers to him also.
Okay.
She says that he writes piddling poetry, but he draws better, because she was very caustic in her remarks. But she was acidic and devastatingly acidic about the Bengal school. This was for her the absolute epitome of the worst type of, and Diwan, in these fabulous books of letters that he's brought out with the annotation, he says what would have happened if she had gone to Shantiniketan and met with, I think there was Vinod Bihari Mukherjee and people at that time who were, doing sort of similar things that would have interested her. Also with Ramkinkar Bej and people. But it didn't happen, and she just stuck with that, and what was this rather effete imitation of the Bengal School of Art, which was at that stage. And she never went to Bengal, to the chagrin of the Bengalis, who feel very hurt about the Bengal School of Art not being appreciated. But she had the same about, also the Bombay School of Art, she wasn't very, so it was that period, and I think she was slightly isolated also, in the sense of living in this, in the sticks there in Saraya and Gorakhpur. Later, when she moved to Lahore in September 41, if she had lived, then I'm sure, because that was then the hub of the intellectual and what was happening. So there would definitely have been a greater interaction between her surroundings and so forth.
You have this vast pool of experiences that you can dip into, which is available to us and available to Amrita at that time, as mentioned. But there are also inclinations and proclivities, what you respond to. There was a time when she responded to the Ajanta murals, frescoes, and then she felt very attracted towards the miniature paintings. So I think, the trajectory of an artist, where it makes the artist feel inspired, feel connected, feel that her experience has a resonance with the kind of work that existed at that time. So it could be a matter of choice also.
I think you're right. She mentions in one of the letters, which I find very interesting, she says, I always meet the type of thing that I need at the time that I need it. For instance, then she was suddenly confronted with Bruegel and Renoir when she goes to Hungary in between. And within this short period of the 8 years, she develops hugely. I mean, it's, what she calls her romantic phase with the great melancholy eyes, and she's out of the psychological romanticism of what India is about very soon after her return. Then she moves on, she was Ajanta, and then she goes on to the miniatures. And if you see the last, the unfinished painting, it's getting more and more abstract. And she talks about, these flat figures. And so it is a huge trajectory for her encapsulated in a tiny space of time, if you think of the development. So apart from anything else, she was absolutely clear on where she was going. It could also be the elan of youth. We were all like that in the 20s. The world belonged to us, and we knew where we were going, and we were very definite about our opinions. There was very little sort of, in that sense, self-questioning, on a different level, but you knew where you were going. And of course, she has this unfortunate, and yet on the other hand, she's frozen into this time warp of 28. I mean, that's nothing. That's nothing. And in the year 1941, when we were still very much in the colonial period, it was, with a nationalistic fervor and all sorts of other things of which she was reacting, because an artist doesn't only, it has to reflect in the work. And the fact that she was together with Nehru and Chamanlal and all these people, so there's a lot of the nationalism that also goes into her work. But you know, it's a question of choice, possibly, and she didn't. She, as I said in her letters, she's devastatingly acidic about the Bengal School of Art. So it could be didn't interest her.
I think then when you started working and the way we are familiar with your work for all these years, I mean, Sabka Baap, Cartier-Bresson, you know, the photographs by Bresson, which we are familiar, and particularly a country like India, and then we have our own Raghubir Singh and Raghu Rai, you know, two giants working. There is always this temptation to be on the street and take picture of people. You know, can be black and white. Raghubir worked in color, but we noticed that you had a departure in the sense that Anand Bhavan, Mani Bhavan, or the file pictures now, and many, you know, I mean, they're all the various Parsis and the Bengal ladies, all this, they're precise subject which you chose and you shot, but you never have photographs which are like, you know, the way, say, I don't mean that you should be doing like Raghu Rai or Raghubir Singh, but so there must be some moment when you actually started working and decided, you know, after doing photographs of Zakir Hussain and decided I'm going to be a photographer and camera is my thing. So what was, which point or which moment was it that you decided, okay, this is the way you are going to be different? In fact, in that context, I feel you are very closer to Umrao Singh.
Thank you.
Photograph, you know?
Yeah, that's
rather than the, you know, in between the
no, I've always...
You follow what I'm saying? I'm like,
yeah. I've always maintained that if we had known Umrao Singh's photography earlier, you know, we only got to know Umrao Singh's photography
in the late
90s.
Yeah, late.
But that
80s.
too with Vivan's intervention. But Umrao Singh's work
Came then a little later.
sometime in 2000, no?
Yeah.
The book was made. No, later.
No, about 2000.
Okay. So if Umrao Singh and Nasreen Mohammadi's work had been more accessible, photography in this country would be at such a different level. We had two schools starting, you know. It's just that it didn't become a school. But Umrao Singh could be one school of photography and Nasreen Mohammadi another school of photography. Those, unfortunately, schools didn't happen, but yes, the great Cartier-Bresson came to India and left such a stamp on India that it became, there was for many years, I think Sadanand will bear me out on that, there wasn't another way to really photograph other than in the decisive moment way. The book, I spoke about Jeff Dyer before. His history of photography is called Ongoing Moment. And I think I subscribe more to the ongoing moment. And as far as Raghu and Raghubir Singh, they have both done what they did so well. Like, who can really have the courage to do street photography after Raghubir Singh in color? He's done it so well. So why add to what is already there? So it was that kind of situation. But the empty spaces happened, I can in my diary even tell you the day probably. Because I was in Goa photographing Mrs. Braganza and she left the room to answer the phone. So I was really irritated because, you know, it was hot and I was trying to take a picture and then she goes off, she was old and walking slowly and I thought, oh, you know. And then I looked at the room and it was even more busy without her. And that's when all these empty spaces started, or I used to call them empty spaces. And I was together with somebody who I wanted to show sort of detail. So it was a combination of both the factors that, okay, Sunil would really like to see this chair. And then at the same time feeling, I called it very dramatically, peopled by unseen generations. And that's really when, that was the point when the empty spaces started. But yes, if we had had a Umrao Singh school of photography, you know, we speak about the Dusseldorf school of photography. I think there was a great school of photography possible with Umrao Singh, and it might still happen. And Nasreen Mohammadi. And again, Nasreen sort of went too fast, and you know, I mean, that's anybody passing through Delhi, please don't miss the show at the Kiran Nadar Museum with Nasreen Mohammadi's work and Amrita.
There's a small section there.
But, I mean, you will agree with me, no? Can you imagine a Nasreen Mohammadi school of photography? And those photograms and that eye that she had. So, when I came to photography, the models were Cartier-Bresson, Raghu Rai, Raghubir Singh. I got to know Umrao Singh too late, but yes, I do feel very close to him.
Thanks.
All right, for a question to Dayanita, I would like to remind Atul that it was 81 when Ram Kinkar died. He died, and that night there was no one there at his deathbed except Kshatriya Tre at the PG hospital in Kolkata. And so you expect people to recognize him in the 30s and the early 40s. It was too early because they were born around 1906-7, Shailos, Binod Bihari, Ram Kinkar and all that. So it was too early, and she was only 28. So, and there were only a group of few young students from the local art college, the government art college in Calcutta, those who took him to the Burning Heart the next day. And there was no one from Shantiniketan. He was not even recognized in Shantiniketan till the 80s. You know how his sculpture Rabindranath was treated with. It was dumped. And later, by forceful intervention of Satyajit Ray, it was, you know, just brought to that white queue or whatever. And just apart from that, I mean, this is a very bad history. And I would like to, well, you mentioned about how do we, suppose if I, as a photographer, want to write poetry, say literature, because long time, say at least 30 years back, the logocentric Renaissance view of paintings or photography have been effaced out. And you know, the so-called institution of art has opened up to crucial disciplines like photography, linguistics. So people, say journalism, cinema, theater, psychoanalysis, linguistics. So people straddle from one space to the other in abandon. So everything is kind of a visual text. Even an image can be a poetry, an image can be a literature. So the so-called institution of art has totally opened up to the so-called bourgeois discipline of arts. So people straddle, the creative people straddle, the art practitioners, they straddle from one space to the other. So why not?
I mean, I'm listening to you and I agree with what you're saying. Why not what?
Why not? I mean, why not? I mean, even a photographer is a poet.
Right.
I mean, even he's also a literary critic.
No, I should just say, I wasn't saying poetry in a literal way. I was saying if we look to the form, if I look at how Arvind Mehrotra writes poetry, if I look at Ondaatje, what I learned from Ondaatje is not how to write a story, but it's about withholding, what Ondaatje holds back from us, or from traveling with classical musicians. So one is to look at other forms in literature and to say, can we aspire to that? As try to build something with the photography, something more than the image, because that one image, one poetic photo is not enough for me.
That is the relation between the signifier and signifier. The author is dead. So I create. So I become the Ondaatje when I read Ondaatje's novels or texts or whatever, it's literature. So I become the author myself.
So I'm just giving you more clues to the story when I put a piece together. And it's an experiment to see if it can hold out or not. I don't know. But it's an experiment because I'm tired of photography the way, just the taking of pictures is no longer enough. I know we are speaking at cross purposes, but it's okay.
No, but we are going to have Nanak amongst us the day after. It's going to be, I think, a very interesting session. Day after, Nanak Ganguly is sitting along with Sadanand, Menon and Diwan Sundaram. I think every evening has to come to a close. But before I thank Dayanita and Navina, I must tell you that tomorrow evening we have a very interesting session. First with Anju Dodiya, she's going to present her work. Then Sadanand Menon. Then they will enter into a dialogue. You can imagine from this evening what will happen tomorrow when there is, this kind of a dialogue between two greatly intellectually inclined and gifted, talented artist and writer. But on Sunday, we have 3 sessions. First session will be Alka Pandey, Atul Dodiya, and Tasneem Mehta. All 3 different kinds of people, but in a way somehow related. Somewhere they will talk about their work, then they will talk about Atul Dodiya's work in the discussion. Then we'll have Rubina Karori. She'll be talking about your work also, the Kiran Museum. She's mentioned the dream, love dream, what is the title? Difficult Love. So, and then Rubina and Kishore Singh, they will be discussing. Unfortunately, we will be missing Girish Shahane. He, as he injured his foot, his ankle, twisted. He braved it out yesterday. He was here, but this morning he left for Delhi. He had a lecture at the National Modern Art Gallery. He was supposed to come, but he today apologized. He's going back to Bombay. So he won't be able to come. So, but we will have Bhavana Kakkar sharing the stage with them. Then after that, of course, I've talked to you about Sadanand and Diwan Sundaram. But see, when we are talking about photography, you must have seen through the last 4 evenings when we had photography as a dominant factor amongst the presenters. We had Pushpamala N, then we had Sheba Chhachhi, then now we had photography-based work by Navina, then we had Dayanita. So it's just a statement in itself that how photography has made inroads into all kinds of visual expression. But then you see, if you imagine a canvas like, 100 years ago, or maybe 60 years ago, a lady, a gifted painter, Amrita Sher-Gil, then we have a continuity of that. We can, touch Navina there, then we'll have Diwan there, we have their images, we have their paintings, and it's just a history kind of woven together in such a beautiful manner that we can experience a different kind of a feeling altogether. We see the paintings, we see Amrita Sher-Gil's pictures, then we have those, the exhibition which we've been talking about, Umrao Singh Sher-Gil's exhibition. I wonder how many of us have seen that. It's a beautiful exhibition, along with the retake of Amrita by Diwan Sundaram. So we have been so lucky and fortunate to have them all here together. Diwan is going to be here, Navina is here, the young, talented, gifted, most gifted photographers, artists, writers, critics are here. We are so obliged to you. Thank you so much once again. Come again.
Congratulations. It was really a wonderful.
And I'm thankful to Gallery Photo Inc., Devika Daulat Singh, who has been instrumental in providing this exhibition to us, which is actually owned by Sundaram family, Navina and Diwan. I'm thankful to them, and I'm thankful to many others which I might have forgotten. Now, you can continue discussing with all of them outside over chai. Thank you so much. Come again tomorrow. Thank you.
I would like to say just one more word. I think we should really, while we are thanking everybody, really thank Diwan Manna for getting this superb panel together in such a short time, and I mean the entire week, and it's been at very short notice and wonderful. Thank you.